Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, awesome listeners. Thank you for giving me your ears today. I hope you've had a great week since the last episode. It's been both my kids' birthdays and celebrations over the last week or so there's not been much time for sewing here. However, I did manage to get a few neck warmers made using the free template and tutorial by Apple Green Cottage, which I mentioned in today's episode. The two that I made for my kids are being modelled in the photo for this week's podcast episode. I wrote a full road test blog post about it for my Free Pattern Friday blog series on my Sozo What Do You Know blog, which I've linked to in the show notes. It's a quick, fun and really useful project that can be made by harvesting fabric from misshapen, felted or moth-eaten knitwear, or using scraps of sweatshirt fabric or polar fleece. I think they also would make fantastic gifts. So aside from those, my only real sewing activities this week were prepping a couple of patterns for forthcoming projects. If you've been doing some making this week, I hope it's going well and you've been having fun. Sustainability-wise, it's always a challenge, I find, to avoid heaps of plastic and disposable stuff around kids' birthdays. But obviously that's what I've been focusing on this week. So my kids' prezzies from us were a mix of 1 or 2 new items each, plus a handmade garment each and some second-hand items. So the second-hand items included a digital drawing pad for my daughter and a massive calculator and marble game for my son. So a massive bugbear of mine are party bags, which are usually filled with little plastic items that almost instantly break and end up in landfill quicker than you can buy them. Every year I try and make them as reusable and as sustainable as possible. So for my kids' ones this year, I used paper bags that they decorated for each guest. Then we put in either a bracelet making kit with wooden beads or a mini stationery set in each, and then a slice of birthday cake and some of the sweets that came out of the piñatas. I avoided balloons and almost all the decorations were ones that we've had for years. I often find that doing things slightly more sustainably takes a bit more planning, but it really can save you money, which I guess is the underlying point of this whole sewing and saving mini-series I've been making. Saving money doesn't have to mean being forced to make less sustainable choices, for example by buying cheaper fabric made from synthetic fibres. Saving money can be done in conjunction with being more sustainable, but I guess that it may take a bit more planning and learning a few new tactics. But before we get deeper into that topic, I want to say a massive whopping thanks to the 5 new patrons who've signed up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. Many thanks to Steph, Moira, Sarah, Cassie and Anna. You 5, plus our wonderful patron Helen, who upped her pledge this week, have really helped balance out the patrons that the podcast has lost lately. I am so thrilled and so grateful because it honestly makes all the difference to the viability of this podcast. If you'd like to join these awesome people and are in a position to donate the price of a cup of coffee each month, please find the link to do so in the show notes, in the episode description and on the website checkyourthread.com. You'll get access to the Check Your Thread Patreon feed, you'll get some sneaky peeks into future guests and a few behind the scenes extras. So unless you are brand new to this podcast, you've probably already heard the first 2 episodes on the topic of sewing and saving, which were episodes 57 and 58. I asked for any additional ideas that anyone has about how to use sewing to save money or how to save money on your sewing practice. Well, you didn't disappoint. There were heaps of great ideas sent to me via email, Instagram and the Check Your Thread website. So here are a bunch of them. So, listener Judy reminded us that public libraries are a great resource. She finds sewing books, including those that contain patterns, and Burda Style magazine from hers. So that is a great way to source sewing information and patterns for free. Speaking of libraries, listener Kristin messaged me to say that Brooklyn Public Library in New York actually lends out various types of sewing machines for up to 3 weeks at a time, along with different feet and needles. I'm guessing that there must be others out there also, so it might be worth checking at the libraries in your area. It could be a great way to give sewing a go if you're brand new to it, or if you're already a sewer but your machine is out of action. If you've got a bunch of projects cut out in advance, you could get quite a lot done in 3 weeks, I reckon. Kristin is a real font of knowledge because they also passed on some info about Fab Scrap textile recycling endeavour, which is based in New York and Philadelphia. Apparently, you can volunteer at Fab Scrap and get £5 of free fabric every time you volunteer. I love that this is both a great use of your time, i.e. keeping textiles out of landfill, and it's a source of free fabric for your own crafting projects. If anyone knows of any similar ventures in other locations around the world, please let me know. And listener Alison suggested a tip to help you cut down from your spending on fabric and sewing stuff. Alison suggested unsubscribing to newsletters or unfollowing social media accounts of businesses that you find hard to resist when they share their new products. And listener Mary Ellen left a comment saying that her tip is to make wearable toiles, aka muslins. Mary Ellen takes as many measurements as possible to adapt a pattern before cutting, and then makes a toile or muslin in cheap or thrifted fabric that she likes. So even if the fit isn't perfect for the first version, it's wearable and can still be used. When wearable toiles aren't really an option, like jeans projects, Mary Ellen likes to use old bed sheets or duvet covers bought from the local charity shop. Mary Ellen also mentions rummage sales, which I think is what we'd call a jumble sale in the UK, as a potential source of fabric. They recommend going at the end of the day, when most of the unsold items are likely to be heading to the rag bins, and then seeing what you can find for next to nothing that no one wants in its current form. I love this suggestion because it means that us sewers are less likely to be cutting up something that somebody else might be about to buy and use in its current form, plus it's going to be so cheap at that point. So the Reseamster on Instagram added to the discussion with a tip about older vintage sewing machines. They prefer to buy sturdier all-metal machines made before the mid-70s, as they are often easier to maintain and fix yourself. They point to Facebook and YouTube as a great source of info on how you can approach these tasks and how you can find the right parts when necessary. So thanks to everyone who shared their tips and ideas. Please keep sending them my way because we need to keep this important topic going. I want to say a particularly big thanks to previous podcast guest Meg Grandstaff. Meg sent me an epic comprehensive email of ideas that made me realise that the episode you're about to hear today could and should be made. As I'm sure you've already noticed, this episode is called Sewing to Keep Warm, and it's the third and final episode in the Sewing and Saving mini-series. So how can we use our sewing skills with the specific purpose of saving money on energy and fuel? I've looked at how we can help keep the chills at bay in 3 particular areas: making clothing, making accessories, and making home items. And because we're trying to save money, many of these ideas, patterns and projects can be accessed for free. So every single pattern and tutorial mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. So no need to pause the episode and go fishing for a pen if you hear about something that interests you. They took bloody ages to compile this week, but hopefully they'll be a useful resource for years to come. Find them along with the show notes for every single episode at checkyourthread.com. Also, if using crafting skills to keep warm is something you're keen to explore even further, then please do check out my friend Saskia's podcast, A Smaller Life, which looks at knitting more sustainably. Saskia can be your guide to knitting to keep warm whilst taking a conscious approach from the very beginning. Okay, my friends, remember the show notes? Here we go. Enjoy. After making episodes 57 and 58, Can Sewing Save You Money and Sewing on a Budget, and then receiving some great additional hints and ideas, it became clear that the mini-series was not finished. I felt that an episode specifically about how to use our sewing skills to help us keep warm is warranted, because energy and fuel is where so much of our money is being diverted to currently. The alarming rise in energy and fuel costs here in the UK at least is such a concern for so many households, and there are some horrendous statistics coming out in the media about how many people are planning to keep the heating off as much as possible this winter. So what specifically can we do as sewers to keep ourselves and those that we care about as warm as possible? I have collated a lot of ideas, most of which are also free or very low cost. Where possible, I've mentioned free patterns or tutorials. Plus, because we need to avoid purchasing new products where possible and reduce the demand for the extraction of more fossil fuels, most of these ideas use at least some existing materials as well. So I've split these ideas into 3 sections. Clothing, where I'll be focusing on items to keep us toasty that work for both inside and outside wear, or items specifically for wearing when we're at home. So I won't be talking about coat making today. Accessories, so additional items that we can use to keep the chills out that can be taken off or added as required. And homeware, things that we can create to make our homes warmer or less drafty, or winterised as Meg Grandstaff calls it. Okay, let's start. Clothing. When I think of preparing for chilly weather, my mind always goes to jumpers, sweaters, sweatshirts and cardigans. So if you're looking to expand your current selection of cosy clothing whilst keeping the costs down, here are some great free patterns and tutorials. So the Stitch Sisters have a DIY patternless cardigan tutorial that makes a robe-style cardi from rectangles. This could work in pretty much any knit fabric that you already own, such as Hacky Knit or French Terry, or you could even use a loose weave blanket. It's sized between a UK 6 and 22 approximately, but it's a tutorial rather than printable pattern, so you could potentially use the measurements included as a guide and adapt to fit other sizes. And from our favourite source of free patterns, Peppermint Magazine, there's a slouchy cardi pattern. It's got a nice kind of curved front edge and inseam pockets, and I really like the wide neckband and deep cuffs. This is a proper downloadable pattern and is graded to fit 28 to 50 inch bust. Peppermint Magazine have a new excellent looking free pattern called the West End Jacket, which is a gender neutral pattern. It's one of those jackets that also looks a bit like a shirt, so you could make it in something cosy like brushed cotton or flannel, and it will probably be a real workhorse. It'll be useful like as a shirt layer in winter or as a light jacket in autumn and spring. It goes from 31.5 inches to 57 inches bust or chest measurement. Peppermint Magazine also has a free pattern called the Jersey Dress, which kind of looks like a slouchy sweatshirt dress, although it's available in a limited sizes from 32 to 40 inch bust. If you're open to buying patterns for adult chilly weather garments, the LB Pullover by Paper Theory is a firm favourite around the sewing community, as are the Toaster Sweater by Sew House 7 and the Marlowe Sweater by True Bias. My personal favourite cardigan patterns are the Kinder Cardigan by Wendy Ward and the Jamie Cardigan by Ready to Wear. Last year I also made a slim fit long sleeved roll neck top using the Nico pattern by True Bias, and that has been wonderful to wear underneath garments to extend their use into colder seasons. Thread Theory have some great chilly weather patterns in men's and masculine styles, including the Finlayson sweater, the Newcastle cardigan and the Kamana sweater. And there are a bunch of free chilly weather garment patterns for kids also. When sewing for kids, I'd really recommend hunting through your scraps and leftovers for any sweatshirt fabric, French terry, fleece or double knit, or seeing what you can harvest from unwanted adult garments, including existing knitwear. If you don't have enough of one particular fabric for a whole garment, have a play around to see if you can combine some. You could literally just cut each pattern piece out of a different fabric, or you could seam some together to make some sort of interesting colour blocking. So here are some free patterns that would be a good basis for that. So Brindle and Twig have 2 free raglan hoodie patterns. One is sized from newborn to 6 years and the other is from 7 to 14 years. I've used this pattern a lot and it is great. Another gender neutral free pattern that I really like is the crew neck sweater by the screen printing company Bobbin Hood. That goes from 1 to 10 years. I've made this in scraps of sweatshirting fleece, polar fleece and Ponte Roma. It's a great basis for combining scraps and leftovers. With both this one and the Brindle and Twig hoodie that I just mentioned, you can leave the waistband off for a different look also. If you're up for a bit of pattern adaptation and you've got a good basic kids t-shirt pattern, Oliver and S have a tutorial for making a ballet wrap style cardigan. And there's a free basic cardigan pattern by Fleece Fun sized from 2 to 7 years. It's got short sleeves, but that could obviously also be altered. If you're open to buying patterns for chilly weather kids clothes, I'd definitely recommend checking out the rest of the Brindle and Twig range, plus Masusu patterns, Waves and Wild and Ikati have also got some great options. But if you're looking toward a winter with minimal heating, chucking a sweatshirt on probably isn't going to be enough. There's a real trend at the moment for quilted coats and jackets, and whilst I'm not going into coat making in this episode, I do think that there's a way to make these type of garments work for indoor use also. I've made a tamarack jacket, which is a pattern by Grainline that comes in 2 size ranges, 32 to 44 inch bust and 40 to 56 inch bust. For that I used a fairly thin wadding and I sometimes wear it indoors and it doesn't feel too jackety. Other similar patterns include the Fibre Mood Molly, Atelier Scamet Absolu, and the Megan Nielsen Hovia. What would probably work better for indoor use, however, is a sleeveless vest or gilet, so your arms can move more easily. These are sometimes also called a body warmer for good reason. So if you're looking for another quilted option, the Fibre Mood Irma body warmer is available, and that is sized from extra small to triple XL. And Simplicity 1499 is a body warmer pattern with multiple views. And the new Craft House have a really sweet waistcoat pattern called the Everyday Waistcoat, which is available for both men and women, and you could also quilt that as well. Listener Heather messaged me to say that she has made the Trailblazer vest pattern by Twig and Tail, and looking at their site they have some other great vests and body warmer patterns for adults and kids. Heather used a thrifted quilt for the lining, which looked really cool. I also saw a new pattern by the pattern company iCat, and that is a fabulously cosy, gender-neutral body warmer pattern for babies and kids up to 12 years called the VN pattern. Which leads me to a point about materials. So, quilted coats, jackets and body warmers have been around for decades, of course, but they are having a real moment right now, which concerns me because of all the additional synthetic wadding which have to be made to keep up with this trend. Often the sewing patterns for these types of garments call for using quilt batting, so I'd urge you to consider buying cotton or wool batting to avoid creating demand for synthetic fibres. The one that I bought for my Tamarack jacket was made using recycled rPET bottles, which I figured was better than buying virgin polyester, but probably still not the best. But better still, as Heather did for her Trailblazer vest, you could potentially source second-hand quilts or sleeping bags to use instead. If the outer fabric looks good, then you could use just one additional layer of fabric, or even just as it is if it looks really nice. But if it looks worn or damaged or dated, it could be used on the inside of a quilted item. If possible though, we want to keep items at their highest level of possible use, so please avoid cutting into functional quilts or sleeping bags that someone might want in its current form to keep warm. I'd recommend asking around friends, family and colleagues, or even on FreeCycle and requesting quilts or sleeping bags that are damaged or have got a broken zip and aren't being used as they are. Similarly, blankets, including wool and fleece ones, could be a great source of fabric to make cosy items. But if they're in good condition, it might be better to keep it as a blanket for somebody who needs it as it is, and try to source a slightly damaged one that, as a sewer and upcycler, we could be able to cut around. Try asking on FreeCycle or even in your local charity or op shops to see if they have anything that they can't sell in its current state. But if you can't source items that are possibly heading for landfill if you don't step in, I still think it's better to use what already exists to make something to keep warm than to go and buy brand new fleece fabric or something like that. So we've talked about cosy garments and overlayers, but what about underlayers? The good news is that there are plenty of free pattern options for these also. Personally, I wear a vest, which others might call a singlet or a camisole, made from jersey, basically every single day from September until May. The ones that I wear are all made using my free Sozo vest pattern, which is available on my blog. I must admit that it is available in a very limited size range, which is approximately UK 8 to 16, because I released it over 10 years ago and I didn't know very much about grading then. But if you like the style and are up for a challenge, you could use it as a base to try some grading yourself. I'm also a big fan of the super basic tank pattern by Half Moon Atelier, which is a free one when you sign up to their newsletter. I have a couple of these that I wear in the summer and to sleep in, but they'd also make a great underlayer. The pattern is sized from 30 to 44 inch bust. Thread Theory have the free Arrowsmith undershirt pattern for men, and that is from 35 inch to 47.5 inch chest. And for kids, there's the girls singlet pattern by Small Dream Factory, and that's from 9 months to 14 years. And Waves and Wilds have the amber singlet from preemie baby to 12 years. Plus, of course, basic slim fit t-shirt patterns work really well for undershirts with more coverage. There's the Esther and Ebby pattern, which is for kids, by Threads by Caroline, which is free when you sign up to their newsletter, for example. Plus, long johns and leggings are a good plan to layer up your legs. There are a ton of free adult legging patterns out there. For example, there's one by Grazilia Fabrics, which is sized from UK 6 to 20. Just do an online search to unearth plenty more. And Waves and Wild have an excellent free leggings pattern for kids from newborn to 12 years, and that's called the Lightning Leggings pattern. And of course, you also need to be cosy in the night, so you might need to update your or a family member's sleepwear. So Sew a Little Seam have the movie night pyjamas pattern, and that is available for men and women and kids. It's for free when you join their Facebook group. It's a knit pattern that you could make in jersey, but I'd recommend a pontel or interlock or even French terry that's got a lot of stretch for extra coziness. I've made these pyjamas for my husband and I plan to make them for my daughter soon. And because of the slim fit style of these pyjamas, both halves of the pattern could potentially be used to make long johns or long sleeved undershirts. But if you prefer PJ bottoms that are made from woven fabric, Patterns for Pirates have the free Walk the Plank PJ bottoms pattern for both kids and adults. If you can get your hands on some unwanted brushed cotton bed sheets, that would be great for making these in. And if you need a robe, LB Textiles has a free tutorial for a zero waste robe that could be made from a blanket or something similar. Okay, next section, accessories. So when you're at home, whether you're working at the computer, watching TV or reading a book, you're more likely to be sitting down and staying fairly still. So having some extra accessories around could be really useful. What I love about making accessories is that they can be a quick palette cleanser project and they make excellent useful gifts, and you can really tailor them to your recipient by the choice of colours and styles and fabrics. And what I love the most is that they can often be made by using what you already own. So have a look through your cupboards or ask around for any unwanted knitwear, particularly anything that has felted, bobbled, got misshapen or accrued a few moth holes, so they're unlikely to be used again in their current form. Plus, garments made from polar fleece that have seen better days are also brilliant for linings and such. Scraps and leftovers of sweatshirt fleece, possibly turned the wrong side out, are also of particular use. So since I got my hair cut fairly short about a month ago, I'm a bit concerned about having a chilly neck this winter. So Kerry, aka Kestrel Makes on Instagram, tipped me off a while ago to a free neck warmer cowl neck tutorial by Apple Green Cottage, and that comes in 3 sizes from toddler to adult. However, there are a whole heap of scarf, neck warmer, cowl neck and infinity scarf tutorials out there that are easily unearthed. And if you're looking for something that is kind of halfway between a garment and a cowl, then the Parkland Cozy Cowl pattern by Wendy Ward is a paid-for pattern that would fit that bill very nicely. And also consider making a cozy wide headband, particularly if you find your ears get chilly. And wrist warmers and leg warmers are also so simple to make and will help you keep cozy. To find a lot of these ideas in one place, previous guest Wendy Ward has also produced a very reasonably priced ebook called the Rutland Collection. That includes how to make an infinity scarf, a snood, wrist warmers, an Alice band headband and waist warmer. And if you need even more head warmth, there are a ton of beanie hat patterns out there that you can make through sewing as well. I've made the Harold beanie pattern by Melliot Sewing Patterns for both my husband and my daughter. I used old knitwear for that and they came out really well. And Scattered Thoughts of a Crafty Mum has a free pattern in 4 sizes from toddler to adult. Well, that's the top of your head sorted, but also you've got to have some slippers or slipper boots to keep your feet warm. But once again, there are a ton of free patterns if you're looking for some out there for this. Melly Sews has a free pattern tutorial and video for making these fleecy lined slippers. They're a single size, but the video includes how to resize them. And Tilly and the Buttons have a free multi-sized downloadable slipper boot pattern. If you've been able to get your hands on some felted knitwear, you could make your own woolly inner soles for wearing inside existing slippers at home or inside shoes or boots when you're going outside. By the way, if you have any pure wool knitwear that has been moth-eaten, you could deliberately felt it yourself as well. So my last idea is those little rice pack hand warmers that you can put in the microwave to warm up. I've linked to a tutorial, should you need one, by I Can Sew This. Okay, let's move on to the final section, homeware. We've talked about covering your body to keep the heat in, but there are lots of ways you can winterize your home to stay cozier and stop the heat escaping. So the first idea for this section, which came from Meg, is the same as the last idea. Making microwavable rice packs, but this time larger ones that you can use to heat up your bed before you get in. You can make these to use instead of hot water bottles if either you don't have any or you can't be trusted with boiling water like me. You can, of course, you also have these to use in your lap or in your pockets if you're sitting down for long stretches of time. Speaking of which, if you're sitting for a while, having some kind of blanket or quilt to lay on top of you is going to be essential. If you don't already own something like that, making something doesn't need to be a massive undertaking if you don't want it to be. And even if you do have a quilt or large blanket that you use on the sofa perhaps, if you're sitting at the computer or in a wheelchair for long periods, you might find that a smaller lap quilt is useful as well anyhow. It could be as plain or as fancy as you like, and also a great opportunity to use up some scraps and create a basic patchwork top layer if you wished. And as with the quilted coats and gilets, see if you can find something already in existence that is perhaps coming to the end of its usefulness in its current form for the wadding. Another excellent use for scraps of fabric is draft excluders. Even if your home is pretty new or recently renovated, it is possible that you're losing a fair bit of heat around your doors and windows. Making simple long rectangles and stuffing them with all the tiny bits of fabric that are no use to you is such a win-win. You're keeping textiles out of the landfill and heat inside your home. And what is great about making your own is that you can get the custom width and height for your door. Plus you can make small ones to use around a drafty window also. Right, the next idea might sound a bit more involved, but in the long term it could be really worth the effort. If you have old unwanted quilts, thin sleeping bags or blankets, you could make a quilted blind to hang up at the windows. Or possibly you could line your existing curtains or blinds to add extra insulation. If you want to try the latter, you could potentially use buttons or press studs to make them removable for the warmer months. Meg sent me a link to the blog post about this that I'll add in the show notes. My final idea for things you could make is a rag rug to go on wood, tiled or concrete floors. So putting your feet on a rug rather than directly on a hard floor is definitely going to stop some of your body heat escaping. So check out episodes 18 and 27 about rag rugging. Plus you can make simpler rag rugs by cutting fabric into strips, then plaiting or braiding them, and then winding those round into an oval and then stitching the strands together. I'm going to drop a link to a video tutorial by Megan Nilsson in the show notes. Okay, my friends, I have exhausted my brain for ideas of how we can use our sewing skills to keep warm. But I have a feeling that some of you will have some more awesome ones. So please share them with me via email, zoe@checkyourthread.com, or via Instagram @checkyourthread, and we can keep sharing these great ideas. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!